God was not punishing me with that. He was disciplining me. He was waking me up. He was allowing me to see that I need Him. I need His forgiveness. I can't do this on my own. I can't be a solid Christian on my own. I just need Him to forgive me. By Him doing that, now I am doing nothing other than just responding to His love.
Welcome to the Reach College Podcast with your guest speaker, Josh Randol.
So part of my testimony is I've grown up in the church, in the Southern Baptist Church, learning about salvation, learning about what Christ did on the cross and how He died for our sins. And my entire life, I've been trying to understand that, trying to grasp that, trying to feel the feelings that I saw all of the other godly Christian people in my life, the way that I saw them feel and respond to salvation. I knew that there were people who loved God genuinely and could not help but share the gospel with others. And I was taught my whole life to go out and share the gospel. But to be honest, I never really wanted to. I was scared and I didn't quite get what was so amazing by it. I didn't say that. I didn't say that I don't understand why this is so amazing. But in my heart, I wasn't affected by it that much. And because I was surrounded constantly by other believers, and that was my identity, was being a good Christian kid, that created in me a very works-based attitude. I would go around and just pretend to be a really good Christian kid and say the right things and say the answers that I knew, basically trying to deceive myself that I had salvation, or that I at least had the spiritual maturity that I saw in others. And so I would go around in my life, going to all the camps, serving in all the areas, and trying to even have godly conversations with kids at school, where I would just end up debating them and then making them mad at me because of how self-righteous I was. So fast forward, I get to late high school, early college, and God really wakes me up. I go through some circumstances where I finally get to see how evil I am and how I'm no different than the rest of all the wicked that I've been taught about that's out in the world. God really got to show me the evil that He offered forgiveness for, that is in my heart. And so by that, I finally realized how to be affected by the gospel. Because the gospel is, we're all sinners, and we need somebody else to pay the price that we deserve to pay. And so by God allowing me to fall deep into my sin and to see my sin deceive me the way that I've been deceiving myself and others by this image, I was able to realize, okay, I am evil. And now I see how amazing it is that Christ has offered me salvation and forgiveness of that sin. So today in Genesis 29, we're going to continue the story of Jacob. We're going to see where Jacob has been. He's been a deceiver. He's been deceiving his brother for the blessings and for the birthrights and all that kind of stuff. Jacob's entire life, he has been trying to get the reward of being redeemed without actually going through the process of being redeemed. He's been trying to steal that reward of being God's chosen seed, that He's going to carry the seed through. But he's not worshiping the Lord. He's not following the Lord. He's just trying to get the blessings. And we saw that by him, deceiving Isaac in order to get his older brother's blessing. So in this first half of the story, well, let me back up. So we saw Isaac being very deceitful, stealing everything that he can in order to get the blessing from God without actually seeking God. He's just seeking the blessing. And then in chapter 28, Taylor O. Spoke last week about Jacob's first encounter with God. He goes on his journey. So what happens is Jacob, by stealing the blessing, all he ends up doing is gaining a curse on his life. By not allowing God to be the provider of that blessing and stealing it for himself, it just turns into a curse. We see their entire family is completely destroyed. Esau now hates his brother and wants to kill him. He has a dying father. His mother is brokenhearted because she's lost Esau due to hatred. She's losing Jacob because now he has to flee from his brother who wants to kill him. So their family is completely destroyed. And Rebekah, being the one who kind of guided Jacob's decisions to deceive his father, she and Jacob have just brought a curse on their family and not a blessing. And so Jacob flees. He's on a journey to Padan Aram. I think that's what it is. But anyways, he arrives to another town kind of on his way, and he stops for the night to have sleep, and he has a dream. And this is where God speaks to him. And God, in this dream, basically, for the first time, speaks directly to Jacob and tells him, hey, I'm going to provide for you. I promise that I will be with you. And so we see Jacob react to this by worship. He worships the Lord. He builds a stone pillar in order to remember that, okay, God has promised me that he's going to provide for me. And so that brings us into our first, where we're at in this story. So, beginning in verse 1 in Genesis chapter 29. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. Okay, first of all, we immediately see God keeping the promise. Jacob has arrived. Now, this journey that Jacob's been on is about 500 miles. So he's going through the wilderness, and he's on this super long journey, and he's made it. He's finally made it there, and that right there is the Lord's provision right out of the gate. And so I've broken this passage into kind of two different sections. The first half, we're going to see a lot of God's provision. We're going to see a lot of God keeping his promise that he made to Jacob in chapter 29 or 28, where he promised that he's going to be with him. So we're going to see, like we have in verse 1, God is immediately already providing external provision, which is safe travels to the land where he sent. Let's continue. Verse 2, as he looked, he saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it. For out of that well the flocks were watered. The stone on the well's mouth was large, and when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. All right. So the second provision that we see is another memorial stone. Now, when we see verse 2, as he looked, he saw a well in the field, and behold. So what I learned as I was studying this is how to see a lot of the words that Moses put in here when he was writing this to draw attention. The word behold is there to draw our attention. So what is he drawing our attention to? He's drawing it to the well that Jacob comes across. Now, he specifically mentions what it's made of and what is on it, which is a huge stone, immediately connecting back to chapter 28, another stone that is there to remind Jacob of God's promise. Just like he built the memorial, God is again providing something else, which is a reminder of his provision for Jacob. He told him, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to provide for you. You just have to follow me. So God is constantly graciously reminding him of this. And then, in verse 3, it's going to give us some context about another provision that happens later on, talking about the weight of the stone. Verse 3, and when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. Shepherds, plural. This was a huge stone that groups of shepherds would have to move together. And we're going to see why that's important to know in a second. All right. Verse 4, Jacob said to them, "My brothers, where do you come from?" They said, "We are from Haran." He said to them, "Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" I want to pause right there. When I first read this, I kind of thought, well, that was a stupid question. It's like he asks, "Where are you from?" They say Haran. He goes, "Oh, so do you know Laban?" It's like there's many times where I'm talking with people and I'm outside of state and I say that I'm from Tulsa and they're like, "Oh, Tulsa, do you know Tim Johnson?" I'm just like, no, it's a big city. It's a very big city. It's highly unlikely. But that's actually not stupid because Laban, we're going to see in later verses some context that is evidence that Laban actually probably lives pretty close to where these guys are at right now. And he's also probably pretty well known. He's got a lot of cattle and a lot of sheep, and so he's probably pretty well known around this area. But anyways, there's more provision that God is showing in this. He's connecting him to people who do know Laban. Because, yeah. So Jacob in verse 5 says, "Do you know Laban the son of Nahor?" And they said to him, "We know him." So right there, God is connecting Jacob to somebody who knows the person that Jacob is purposefully going to find. So Jacob's been on this journey. Some more context that I forgot to mention. Rebekah, Jacob's mom, specifically sends Jacob to go find her older brother, Laban, so that he can find a wife in the family, because that was a custom. You don't marry outside of the family. And so his whole journey, his 500-mile journey, is going to find Laban. So immediately he arrives. We're seeing God provide for him, and then he's also providing him a connection to Laban, which is just to some shepherds who know Laban. So let's read again. Verse 6, he said to them, "Is it well with him?" They said, "It is well. And see, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep." There we go again. Another provision directly. Now, not just some shepherds who know Laban, but his daughter. Now he has a family connection, somebody who clearly can bring him to Laban. I also want to draw attention to the very close similarities between Jacob and his connection or his meeting with Rachel, and the connection that has with Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob's parents. Abraham, the father of Isaac, sent his servant to go to a land to find his son Isaac a wife. And where he finds that is at a well in a field. Just like what's happening here again. So we're seeing God work the same way through Isaac's children as he did for Isaac, as he did for Abraham, which is just a reminder that God is continually over this, and he's the one working this out. So verse 7. He said, "Behold," this is Jacob speaking. He said, "Behold, it is still high day. It is not time for the livestock to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go pasture them." But they said, "We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep." So when I read this, I was really struggling with what the heck are they arguing about and why are they arguing about it? Why did Jacob say this? Why is he making demands of how they should shepherd and all this? And through some study and some commentary, I think really Jacob's just confused as to why they haven't already moved the stone from the well, and why they haven't watered the sheep already, and why they aren't already gone. Why are they just kind of hanging out waiting to move the stone? And I think the conclusion that I came to was that they were just waiting for more guys to show up because they couldn't move the stone. It was too heavy, and so they were waiting for more shepherds to come to the area so that they can move the flock. Now, where God provides through this situation is as the time it takes for Jacob to have this interaction with these shepherds, Rachel is still on her way coming up. So at the very least, God is just providing a perfect aligning of Jacob and Rachel to be able to meet. So if that's all it is, that's great. God's providing again. So as long as it takes for Jacob to have this conversation, Rachel now shows up into the scene, and now he has a connection to be able to interact with her. So picking up in verse 9, while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now, as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban his mother's brother, Jacob came near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud, and Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman, and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. So, this is kind of the last piece of provision that we see God. How the heck did he move that stone? It's a huge stone. We're given a lot of evidence that says this is something that a group of shepherds would have to move. And right as Rachel shows up, he freaking does it himself. He just moves it off. Like, holy cow. Now, the interesting thing about this, we've seen God providing the entire time. We see God provide him strength right in that moment. And what does Jacob not do? He doesn't stop and worship the Lord. He doesn't stop and thank the Lord for all this provision. He doesn't stop and thank the Lord that he gave him strength to do this thing that it takes groups of men to do. What he does instead is he flexes his own muscles. This is directly in line with what he's been doing the entire time. His entire life, he's been flexing his own muscles. He's been trying to steal the provision from the Lord for himself without actually worshiping the Lord and thanking the Lord and being humble and realizing that everything good in his life comes from the Lord. So by doing that, there's really not a whole lot of good in his life. So that brings a huge connection, as I was reading this, to my own story. Like I said, trying to steal these actions of humility and spreading the gospel out of the love in my heart. I didn't have any love in my heart. I was just trying to catch the peace and fulfillment that I could see in other people's life who knew Christ. I was trying to figure out a way to make that happen without actually seeing how the Lord redeemed me, because I didn't know what it is he was redeeming me of, because I didn't see my sin. I thought I was a great Christian kid. And so Jacob is continuing to do that, just like I did. I was flexing my spiritual muscles that I didn't have, so that I could be seen as a godly person who knew the Lord, who knew Christ. But I didn't. So how often do our works distract us from the Lord providing in our lives? I think a lot of times we come here to this church and we're excited. We're hearing the word, and we immediately want to jump on this train that we see other people. We see leaders, we see people pouring into, and instead of trying to figure out how they got there, we just want that gift. We want to receive the honor that we see those people getting. But the truth is, nobody here got to the place of influence or to the place of leadership without first being destroyed by God. God has revealed in my heart that I am a terrible, sinful, broken person. And it wasn't until I realized that I realized how amazing it is that he would forgive me of that. Because he's offered all of us that promise that he's going to forgive us and that he wants to save us from that sin. But until we see that sin, until we see our arrogance and our evilness in our heart, that forgiveness doesn't really mean much because we don't know what he's forgiving us of. So let's continue in point number 2. What God will use for internal provision, the enemy uses for gain. So we're going to see in this next part of the story, Laban is beginning to deceive Jacob. But we're going to see how God is going to use the enemy's attempts to get gain in his life by using Jacob. God's going to turn that into internal provision for Jacob. So he's been giving external provision. Jacob has not been responding. He's not been worshiping the Lord through external provision that the Lord has been giving him. So now the Lord's going to go deeper, and he's going to get to Jacob's heart. So picking up in verse 13. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Jacob told Laban all these things, and Laban said to him, "Surely you are my bone and my flesh." And he stayed with him a month. Again, we see God providing. He is accepted by Laban. He meets Laban, and Laban loves him. Now it says in verse 13, the end of verse 13, Jacob told Laban all these things. What do we think Jacob was telling Laban? He was probably talking himself up. He was probably telling him, "Hey, I just got on this huge journey for 500 miles, and I was out with the shepherds, and I helped them by moving their stone off, and I connected with your daughter, and so I'm pretty cool." We continue to see Jacob's character as he's always been. Again, contrast to what we saw in Isaac and Rebekah's coming together. The servant that was sent to find Rebekah, he stopped and he worshipped the Lord. He wasn't, thinking of himself. He was worshiping the Lord. And Jacob is having a perfect opportunity to tell somebody else about how God has provided for him. And that's not what he does. He just tells them about everything that he did. So we're going to see kind of the very beginning of Laban's, what his future goal is, which is to manipulate and to deceive Jacob. Now, this could be partially genuine. I'm sure Laban is actually excited that there has been somebody who is kin to him to come, and somebody that he can give his daughters to. But I think the words, "Surely you are my bone and my flesh," and he stayed with him a month. I think that's honestly just knowing who Laban is going to continue to be. He's probably just hyping Jacob up to get him to be to let his guard down. He's trying to let Jacob know that, hey, I really love you, and this is great, and I'm going to do everything that's great for you, and you should just listen to me, and I really care about you. And it's like, he may slightly care about him, but really he's just kind of trying to woo him and bring him in so that he can do what he's going to do. So picking up in verse 15, then Laban said to Jacob, "Because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be?" Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, "I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man. Stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. So Jacob has been with Laban for a month now before they have this discussion. And Jacob has probably been proving himself, helping him out with chores and stuff, and proving that he's very helpful, which that's just another thing of God's provision. Jacob, when we read the beginning of his story, he was a soft boy. He was not a hard worker. They made that contrast very clear between him and Esau. Esau was the outdoorsman, was very rough and hairy, and Jacob was just a mama's boy he stayed inside cooking food. So through his 500-mile journey, God provided him a work ethic, hardness, that he could give him the strength to move the well off the stone, and now he's making himself very useful in Laban's flock to be able to help out with shepherding and all that kind of stuff. And so Laban, realizing how useful Jacob can be, he's already scheming in his head, okay, I need this guy to stick around. But because Jacob is Laban's family, he doesn't want to treat him like a slave. He doesn't want to work him for free. And he doesn't want to pay him minimum wage. But he knows Jacob is kind of homeless right now. He's been on a journey, and the only opportunity, or the only hope that he has is to hopefully find Laban so he can have a home and stay. And so Laban, knowing this, knows that I'm not going to get any money out of Jacob, but I can get his service. So I need to figure out how can I get his service to stick around for a long time. So he knows he has a daughter. He knows that Jacob probably is really liking one of his daughters because that's who came up. Rachel and Jacob both introduced Jacob to Laban. So he knows that, okay, there's probably a good chance that he's going to ask for one of my daughters. And that would be perfect. One, I get to marry one of my daughters. And then next, in order to get one of my daughters, he's probably going to serve me. And that's exactly what he does. He offers to serve him for 7 years. Now, another cool thing, later we're going to see in Mosaic law that it is in the law that all debts after 7 years are to be forgiven. And Taylor, that was written after this, right? Okay. So just confirming. So Moses, knowing of this story, learns from this story and realizes people getting roped into stuff like this eventually is going to be really bad. So he writes the law that all 7-year debts are to be forgiven after 7 years. So, right. So Jacob offers to serve 7 years Laban in order to get a wife. This works out perfectly for Laban because now he gets to have 7 years of some strong guy helping him do everything. And honestly, Jacob really loves Rachel, and so he's really willing to do anything. And I think Laban knows that. And so Laban is probably getting really confident in his ability to work this situation out for himself because he realizes this kid, Jacob, he's pretty naive. He's going to do anything. He's already offering to stay with me for a whole 7 years before I give him my daughter. So I can really milk this. So Jacob's eyes are only on Rachel. He's not seeking the Lord. He's not asking the Lord for help. He's not asking the Lord to. So when Laban asks him, "What should I pay you?" Jacob's not like, "Okay, let me pray about it. Let me take this to the Lord and see what He wants me to do." He immediately is just like, "I want your daughter, and so I'll work for you for 7 years because that seems honorable." So what I see in this is Jacob is, again, continuously, his eyes are only on the gift. His eyes are only on the provision, which is Rachel, a wife. Again, that takes me back to my own story. I was never focused on the Lord himself. I was never focused on what the Lord wanted for me or what he wanted to do with me. I just wanted the gift of peace and happiness in my life that I could see come from others who did know the Lord. So really, again, how often do we take our eyes off of God and put them on the gifts that he's promised us? How often do we forget that the point of why gifts are so fulfilling is because they come from him? Because when we take gifts out of the Lord's timing and out of the way that he designed them to be, again, we just turn them into curses on our lives. And so as we seek the gift from the Lord and take our eyes off of him, it leaves us unfulfilled and broken, deceived and manipulated, like what we're going to see Jacob experience. So picking up in verse 21, we're going to see the Lord provide internal provision through discipline. So we've seen the Lord provide external provision. Jacob did not worship the Lord from that. We see Laban begin the process of trying to kind of deceive Jacob, and now we're going to see Laban execute that deception on Jacob. But the main point that I want us to see is, how does the Lord provide for Jacob through this? So picking up in verse 21, then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed. Right there, immediately, we are getting a callback to Jacob and Esau's interactions. The first time that Jacob deceived Esau was coming out from working in the field. He was exhausted, and he came into the tent, and he tells Jacob, "Give me that food, for I'm exhausted." And we see Jacob's responding the exact same way. He's exhausted, and he comes to Laban, and he says, "Give me my wife, that I may go into her, for my time is completed." It's like, I've done the work. Give me what I deserve. Already we're seeing the comparison between Jacob and Esau. Verse 22. So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. But in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her servant. And in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, "What is this that you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me?" So Laban, again, knowing what he's doing, creates the feast, probably made an effort to make sure that Jacob got tipsy so that he wasn't really aware of what was going on. And that's probably how he executed this switch on Jacob. So Jacob's probably not completely coherent. It's nighttime. I read somewhere that in commentary that it was also custom that the bride would wear her veil all the way up until like the wedding night, like all the way up until bed. She would have the veil on her face. And so this is how this could happen. Because honestly, you read that and you're like, how could he have been so stupid? What in the world? I mean, it clearly describes the differences between Rachel and Leah. They're clearly different people, but this is how it worked out. So again, immediately we see this and we understand the connection between Jacob and Esau. Jacob reacted very much the same to the way Esau reacted when Esau was deceived by Jacob. He's freaking out. He's like, "Why have you deceived me?" I really wonder if when Jacob said those words in verse 25, "Why then have you deceived me?" I really wonder, did Jacob not say those words and then immediately go, "Oh, I did this. Interesting. This is not a good situation, and I'm starting to see myself." So yeah, we're seeing God go internal into Jacob's heart, and he's starting to pluck at him. He's starting to let him know, "Hey, you've done the same thing. You can't think that Laban is so evil and that you also are not this evil." Verse 26, Laban said, "It is not done so in our country to give the younger before the firstborn." Now that is huge. Again, by Laban saying this, I can't help but think that Jacob had to be reminded of his own story and where he came from. Because in his country, it was not done so to give the blessing of the firstborn to the younger, which Jacob did that. He stole that, and now it's being stolen from him. So Laban says, "It is not done so in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also, in return for serving me another 7 years." Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his female servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her servant. So Jacob went in to Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served Laban another 7 years. So we see the ultimate deception executed on Jacob's life. And Jacob really doesn't have anything else he can say. There's no way he can work this out. But now he's roped into serving a total of 14 years. He completes the week with Leah. It was a ceremonial wedding week, so he was supposed to finish that. And so now, after being roped in by Laban again, he has to serve another 14 years. That's so far 14 years of his life that he is here with Laban, serving for Leah, because he is actively choosing not to remember the Lord's promise He's only focused on his own gain, his own blessing, his own getting what he wants. So we have seen in this passage, God has kept his promise to Jacob. Though bad things are happening to Jacob, that doesn't mean God was not keeping his promise. God promised that he would be with Jacob, that he would take care of him, that he would move the seed through him. Well, obviously, he's providing that opportunity for the seed to be moved through him. He does have wives now, who the Lord is going to move the seed through. So he's keeping his promise through that. But then, even deeper, what I want us to see in this story is how God has provided for Jacob internally. If Jacob's going to be the man who God uses to move the seed through, who God uses to lead the people, he's also going to have to mold him into that man. He's also going to have to turn him into the kind of leader who can lead God's people. And so the biggest way that I've seen the provision in this passage is God moves internally. He's disciplining him. He's not just giving him a taste of his own medicine. He's not inflicting karma on Jacob's life. He's disciplining him. He's training him. He's making him into a man. Now, in this passage, we don't see Jacob realize that. It just ends with, well, now he has to serve another 7 years. And so, even though we don't see that, as I was studying and as I read some commentaries, there was mention of Genesis chapter 48, verse 15 through 16. And so, even though we don't see Jacob worshiping and thanking the Lord for his provision, we do eventually, at the end of Jacob's life, which we're going to get there eventually, but I'm going to give a spoiler alert today. In Genesis chapter 48, verse 15 and 16, Jacob is talking to Joseph, and he says to him, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys, and in them let my name be carried on, in the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." So we see later on, Jacob eventually does finally realize that God has been with him, that God has taken care of him, and that God has removed his evil. Jacob eventually does realize how evil he has been. And so I really want to hit on the fact that even though these are terrible circumstances, Jacob's just in love, and because of that, he gets severely punished. God's not the one punishing Jacob. God is disciplining Jacob. And that is a huge application that we all need to be reminded of constantly in our lives is God does not punish his children. He disciplines them. Just like in my story, I spent my entire life deceiving myself, not worshiping the Lord because I didn't really get his love for me. I just wanted the peace and the reward of being close with God. And so it wasn't until he allowed me to fall into sin very, very deeply and realize that I am evil. None of my works that I've been trying to do my entire life have gotten me anywhere close to the Lord. But really, I got punched in the mouth and realized I'm evil. And now I'm stuck in a situation that is so dark and is leaving me feel so far away from the Lord. And God was not punishing me with that. He was disciplining me. He was waking me up. He was allowing me to see that I need him. I need his forgiveness. I can't do this on my own. I can't be a solid Christian on my own. I just need him to forgive me. And by him doing that, now I am doing nothing other than just responding to his love. And so I think the biggest takeaway is God does not punish his children. He disciplines them for their own good because he loves them. And so as we go out today and as we break up into pairs, I want us to talk about that. Talk about how you view God. Do you understand that maybe the hard things that you have gone through in your life about dealing with seeing your sin when you experience conviction, when you experience the weight of not being good enough, do we view that as God heartlessly punishing us or condemning us, or do we understand that this is just God loving you? This is God sanctifying you. This is Him keeping His promise that He's made, which is everyone who is saved, He will make you perfect. And that's exactly what God does whenever He lets us feel the weight of our sin and see ourselves the way that we really are. So as we break up into pairs and as we go about our days, think about that. Think about how God is loving you through sanctifying you, through taking you through the harsh process of being redeemed.
Hey guys, this is Philip Jackson, pastor of young adults at Evergreen Baptist Church. I want to invite you to come to Reach. We meet every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at Evergreen Church in South Tulsa, just east of Mingo on 111th Street. The mission of Reach Tulsa is to cultivate a young adult community that's defined by real transformation and the sincere pursuit of a godly life through training in biblical disciplines, personal development, and intentionally transitioning into independence as mature members of the body of Christ. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe to our content. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Reach Young Adult Ministry is a part of Evergreen Baptist Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. For more information and additional lessons, please visit our website, evergreenbc.org.